Welcome everyone to the second Lutra webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the New Zealand drinking water standards and what this means in terms of compliance and compliance reporting. My name is Masena Konawhiranasi. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Lutra, and I have two subject matter experts with me today. One is Jonathan Church. Many of you will know John. John has spent a number of years working in compliance, in the compliance field, particularly associated with water. And on my right, I have Jitesh Lala. Jitesh is our infrastructure data product manager, and so Jitesh has got a lot of insight in terms of how compliance reporting works and how that will look going forward. So I've got a range of questions already that have been shared with us, and you'll see Q&A on the bottom of your screen there. Just feel free to pop in any questions you like. They'll come through to me as we progress through the session. And so now I'll start with a few points of discussion for John. So John, given that we've now got the draft exposure, which was issued by Taumata Arawai,
Yep.
One of the first things that is really obvious is that reporting against E. coli is no longer a requirement or a validation of compliance or non-compliance. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so that's right, Matt. So the E. coli for use at a treatment plant for demonstrating bacterial compliance is no longer an allowable method. So what that means is where plants might be currently sampling E. coli to demonstrate bacterial, they'll have to change to a different method. And the methods that are available are either chlorine, ozone, or UV to demonstrate bacterial. However, it's probably worth mentioning that, of course, those are all online things. Effectively, all compliance monitoring is now online. So you'll also, from a practical perspective, need the instrumentation to demonstrate that compliance.
Right, so potentially that's quite a big change for some organisations.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah, if I'm responsible for a number of plants and I don't have any of that in place, what kind of time frame have I got to get myself organised?
Yeah, so as far as we're aware, the draft standards are currently out in the public domain, and the intended date, as per what they're indicating, is that these will be finalised and come into effect on the 1st of July. So in theory, on that date, from then on, you should be trying to meet the compliance requirements, the new ones.
Right, so that's just over 3 months.
Roughly,
Yeah,
give or take,
okay.
not very long.
Could be quite tight.
Yep.
Cool, thank you. So that is a really big change, isn't it? Another one, a question has come through around non-compliance events going from 3 to 15 minutes, depending on the processes.
Yep.
What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so to explain that one, so at the moment the compliance, there's various compliance processes that you need to demonstrate compliance with, and one of the demonstrations is that you don't have any 3-minute events. For instance, on a filter, this might be not exceeding a value of 0.5 NTU for 3 minutes. So one of the changes in the new draft standards is that this has been changed from 3 to 15 minutes. And this brings us more into line with the international US EPA and various other requirements. I mean, and from a practical perspective, it's always been a very difficult one for people to achieve. 3 minutes is obviously not very long at all. So going out from 3 to 15 means that there's more time that you can be close or over that parameter before you become non-compliant. But once you hit that 15 minutes, yeah, that's game over.
Yeah, right, okay. And what about Chlorine Ct contact time? So that's also changed, and we know that it's gone from, well, it's at least 6 to 15, 95% of the day or 98% of the day. So what is the impact of that?
Yeah, so Chlorine Ct. Everyone who's using chlorine as a demonstration right now will be familiar with the need to show 6 milligram a litres of Chlorine Ct. You'll be using various methods to demonstrate that. This change is simply changing that number from 6 to 15, so it means more chlorine contact is required. And from a practical perspective, most people will probably be meeting this already. So if if you're able to meet the 15 right now, then there's no problem whatsoever. However, if you're in a situation where you're not getting very much chlorine contact, there's various ways that you'll need to use to boost that level up to 15. So the ways to do that is you can have better baffling on your tanks or system. You can increase the residence time by putting in more tanks, pipe work as well potentially. You can increase the chlorine dose, and probably not what most people would do, but you could also reduce the flow out of the plant, because all of these things increase the contact time. If that's not an option, then you'll need to use one of the other demonstrations, which means ozone or UV to demonstrate the bacterial.
Okay,
Yep.
so a good range of options available.
Yeah. There's definitely alternatives.
Right, cool, thank you. How about the requirement to keep the pH between 6.5 and 8 and the chlorine above 0.3?
So the chlorine FACE requirement right now is that you must be more than 0.2, as everyone knows who deals with it. So that's been changed to 0.3. So most people already have that. 0.2 is quite low anyway. So in terms of what you have in your system, most people will be already able to meet that. And if you're not, then it means relatively simply increasing the dose to achieve a bit more residual. The pH, however, is completely different. So the pH is a new requirement, and this new requirement relates to it comes from what is currently at the moment a pH is used as a aesthetic determinant, not a compliance one. So in the draft exposure, it becomes a compliance requirement. So the requirement is that you must be between 6.5 and 8 on the outlet of your plant. The intention behind this is we think, to make sure that the FACE is good and that corrosion's within control potentially. But from a practical perspective, that means that you'll need to control the pH out of the plant. And a lot of plants may not have that at the moment, so they'll need some form of pH control.
Right, so something
which is a major change. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Now we also know that there are changes with instruments and measuring parameters and so on, and it seems to be around specifics on where those instruments are placed. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so there hasn't really been much guidance about positioning, an analyzer on a system to measure the compliance in the current standards. But what it has now in the draft exposure stated is basically that you're nominating your compliance monitoring points. And for instance, the intention is that the point is representative and accurate of the treatment that you're doing. In most cases, there isn't much of a change. If it's a filter, it's on the outlet of the filter, etc. But for chlorine, again, as an example, you're talking about having a monitoring point after your chlorine contact and before the first consumer. So many people might have it at the outlet of their plant right now, but they might be using the contact time in a pipe. So really the monitoring point should be at the end of that contact time to meet that requirement. So it may mean that some people need to move analyzers or get new ones, depending on what the arrangement is.
But it removes, it's less ambiguous. It's quite clear, and so you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to be doing it.
That's right.
Yeah, it's good. And what about the change to daily compliance? Because this one, everything's going to potentially affect different organisations in different ways, but this one's actually quite a key one, isn't it?
Yeah. So daily compliance is nothing new, in that at the moment the bacterial requirements for online bacterial is in a daily. You look at the compliance over the course of a day. But what the new draft draft exposure is saying is that the protozoa compliance is also now daily. Now at the moment it's monthly. So monthly the difference between daily and monthly means that the particular requirements that you need to meet, instead of being over the course of a month, are over the course of just one day. To take filters, for instance, you have the requirement that it can't be higher than a value of, say, 0.1 for 5% of the time. Over the course of a month, that's quite different than over the course of the day, because you may historically, or well, currently until this comes into effect, but you may be over that value for some of the day, and then over some of another day, and some of another day, and still not hit that 5% of the month. By moving the protozoa compliance to daily, it means that window becomes shorter, even though the total amount of time in the month is still the same. So it's basically targeting in on exceedances in a day. And of course, it also means that the compliance reporting is now all the same. So bacterial's monthly, protozoa is also monthly.
Yeah.
Monthly. Excuse me for a second, it's daily. So bacterial's daily and also protozoa's daily.
Yeah, let's get that right, cool.
Yep.
So this change, in addition to the E. coli, from an operations perspective, it's going to mean more manual labour required in compiling those reports and getting that data and information together, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So not being able to use E. coli at the outlet of the treatment plant means straight away that anyone who is using it is going from a sampling schedule. So a sampling schedule where you're checking E. coli, positives come back, you take more samples, that sort of an arrangement, to needing to have both the treatment, obviously, to start with, but also the online monitoring that you need to demonstrate this. Because all the online monitoring requires minute data values and all of the associated things that come with that. So yeah, it is quite a significant change and a big step up in information and accuracy of
Yes. And
over
from
E.
a planning
coli
perspective, something to really take into consideration
Yep.
when you're thinking about resources. Okay, awesome. Right, so I have a question here about membrane. So you've mentioned that, and we'd like to know a little bit more about membrane and cartridge service states and being monitored, and what that's all about, John.
Yeah, so this is something that the draft exposure clarifies quite a bit, but it's one specific requirement that you must monitor the states of your process equipment, effectively your compliance processes. So what that means from a practical perspective is that for, say, your filter, you're monitoring whether it's in service, out of service, in backwash, in filter to waste, whatever kind of state that it's in. For a UV system, it may be turned on, turned off, or faulted, for instance. The reason behind this is purely practical, and it's for information reasons. If you are having a turbidity exceedance, but you're filtering to waste, then it's not going to supply, and therefore it's not an issue. So making sure this kind of information is logged is basically getting more depth to understanding what's going on with the plants and being able to show that yes, you're compliant or not.
Yeah. So another change or something new, and that would be dealt with through change in software or a program or
yeah, that's right.
Like
I mean, so most suppliers will already be monitoring this kind of stuff. The difference is that they probably aren't reporting on it. So it's really just bringing that into the reporting and showing what the services are doing. For those who aren't monitoring it, they'll obviously need to start.
Okay. And what about the pressure? The challenges around membranes and pressure and compliance.
Yeah, so this is one area that's always had a bit of mystique around it, but so with membranes, there's now a requirement that the direct integrity tests must be performed if the membranes run every calendar day. So that sounds simple. It's simple in practice. You run the membrane, you perform the integrity test. However, many suppliers, and I know this from practical experience, will have their membrane set up to do an integrity test after 24 hours run time. So what that means is that right now the membrane may run for 24 hours in one day and not do a test, and then run for 24 hours, run for 12 hours in one day, not do a test, and then in the next day run for the rest of the 12 hours and then do a test. Now under the new rules, that's non-compliance. It needs to do a test both on the first day and the second day. There's also an extra bit that's been added. If the membrane fails the test, then it needs to be shut down until a subsequent test is done and it's proven that it's met its integrity requirements. So
if I'm understanding that right, if I'm running them for 24 hours over 3 days, it's irrelevant. I've still got to do the test each day.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So there's new rules, there's changed rules, and there's some old rules. Has anything disappeared?
Yeah, so there's a few of the monitoring requirements that have changed. A lot that have been updated, and yeah, some of them have disappeared entirely. So one of those examples is at the moment filters have a set of, you can't be more than a certain value for 5% of the month, 1% of the month, and 3 minutes. The 1% has disappeared. So what that means is now it's a case of 5% and 15-minute events. So really that simplifies things. It means one less thing to worry about, even if the turbidity values for the filter, say, haven't changed at all. It means, yeah, slightly simpler to report on. One of the other ones that I'll mention as well is that combined filter turbidity is also disappeared completely. It's been replaced with the online individual filter compliance requirements. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, John. And this is a really big one, and we all know about this from our experience, and it's about missing data and missing minutes. So, give us a good rundown on how this is going to look going forward.
Yeah. So missing data is has been, and what the requirements are for compliance has been clarified. So effectively within this draft exposure, missing data will cause non-compliance if within a day you either have 15 consecutive minutes of missing data, or you have a total of 72 minutes of missing data. Where do those numbers come from? Well, it basically relates to the 15-minute events that we've talked about before, and the 5% of the day. So if you're missing enough data to hide one of those events, then it might have been non-compliant. You don't know, so therefore that's a technical non-compliance. Yeah. So
it's 15 minutes in a block,
yep,
or 72 in total across
over the day. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that means that again, it's something where missing data may become a more of a problem for a supplier. Now this has been clarified, but yeah, in principle, it's a definite improvement.
Yeah, great. So again, good to get the clarity around it. More changes coming. So that was really useful. Thank you, John. I do have, if you just bear with me for a minute, I do have a couple of other questions that have come through. So assuming, John, that I need assistance with all of the taumata arawai work or guidance, I'm assuming that I would start by reaching into Lutra in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, definitely.
Just make a contact.
Yeah. So we've been, we obviously have experience with these kind of issues. Quite a lot of experience, both on the practical side and the information side. So yeah, definitely we can help out with sorting out what needs to be done and what the best choice is. Especially if there's questions about, will I be able to meet these requirements? What's missing? Do I need to change a process potentially?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And looking at different possible solutions.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, John.